Hey, welcome to the podcast, Leonard.
Hey, thank you, Asher. It's good to be here.
It's been a while since I've seen you, and it's been a minute since we've talked coming off of the extreme execution training.
Yeah, it's about 2019.
Yeah. So, to introduce you to the audience real quick, who do you say you are?
I am a ending the school to prison pipeline strategist. I help teachers and administrations with their disciplinary issues so students can succeed in the classroom and avoid the prison system.
How'd you get involved in that? That seems very vital.
I was working actually in the prison system. I worked in the prison system for 27 years. And I also was a part-time adjunct instructor as a university locally. And what I saw was the same people that were walking into my office at the prison were walking into my classroom, same demographics, same backgrounds. And I just started to think about, why do some make it and some don't? And as I spent more time researching what was going on and actually talking to my students and talking to the men that were incarcerated, I found out that a lot of it started where things went wrong was in school, getting suspended, getting expelled, going to alternative schools, while the ones that were coming into my classroom had some kind of intervention that prevented that. And after a while, I didn't feel like the prison system was supporting me in my efforts to keep men out of prison. And I said to myself, you know what, I'm just going to keep young people from going to prison rather than helping men not come back to prison. I think it's that old Desmond Tutu saying, sometimes you have to figure out, you have to stop pulling people out the river and figure out why they're falling in.
Mm, I like that. And I guess tell me a little bit more about that. Like, how much time did you spend working in the prison system, and why did you start there to begin with?
I've always wanted to be a teacher, but as I decided to start choosing when I went to college and started choosing a major, I thought about, how am I going to make money? And I knew I didn't want to do advanced degrees. So I chose criminology as my major at the University of South Florida, and I double majored with sociology.
Hmm.
And my first job was a police officer, and my personality just didn't mix well
Hmm.
with being a police officer. And I got into counseling and eventually started counseling in the federal prison system. And I just loved to see men transform their lives, men figure out what their purpose was. And even though a lot of my time early was working with men that had a lot of time, even life sentences, I still see the transformation in them. And I've always wanted to do more. And I finally got into helping men stay out of prison.
Hmm.
And as I started working more, the older I got, the younger and younger the guys coming in were getting.
Hmm.
And when you build relationships with younger people and you see the potential, it energized me every single day. Like, people would say how they hated, how could you work in a prison? It really energized me to unlock some of the potential that they had, have them see where their potential was. And the real turning point for me, why I got out, was I thought I was doing a really good job my stats had proved I was doing a really good job of helping keep men out of prison. But I didn't feel like I was being supported by administration. And there was just one day, a mom had called me, and she told me her son's name, and I told her he hasn't been back in prison in almost 5 years. And she said, you're right, that's why I'm calling you, is he talks about you, and I wanted to thank you for what you did with him. And she said she was actually the one that opened my mind to leaving the prison system, when she said, wouldn't it be better to, instead of helping men not come back to prisons, to help young people stay out of prison.
Wow.
And yeah, I thought about it, and a week later, I went into the warden's office and said, I'm leaving. I'm finding another way. And I had 27 years in. I don't want people to get confused that I just left a job and started on this career path. I was eligible for retirement, so I
Right.
retired.
Mm.
I have, and I have health care and all that stuff. So I had a foundation to do what I was doing, to go in full force into education and speaking.
Yeah. That I'm glad you made that disclaimer, but also at the same time, it's good that you, in taking your retirement, you essentially decided to go in a direction to continue doing the work that you'd started, even being 27 years in, and just getting that feedback from that mom. I think that always speaks highly of you and highly of what you do when you hear from other people, like maybe by like third party. It's like so and so told me about you and told me about what you did. I guess, what was that conversation with the warden like whenever you let him know, like, hey, it's about time for me to go on to something else?
It's funny because it's the federal government, and people are amazed that you would want to leave a good government job with good government benefits. And like, you don't want to stack up the first words out of his mouth was, you don't want to stack up your 401k some more. It's like, no, I'm okay. I'll handle it. And since it's federal law enforcement, I could retire after 25 years. I went 27. I'm only 48. I can start another career. People think that, oh, I'm too old, or whatever. And that thought didn't really run through my mind. It was like, I'm still young. There are things I can do in my 50s that I won't be able to do in my 60s. And I can start it now. I can do it now. And it just amazed the warden and my supervisor that I would do it. Um, because at 48, you still can't get some of the benefits that you could get if I had went to the mandatory retirement age of 57.
Right.
But that wasn't, to me, that I can make up that money. It wasn't really for me about the money anyway. So when the first words out of their mouth was about money, I said, I know I'm doing the right thing now. Because if their first thing out of their mouths is about money and not about my impact,
Mm.
then I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah. And what's it been like now that you're out and being able to work with younger kids at the level that they're at, and kind of giving them the attention, especially young men, for that fact that they may not get from other teachers or from home?
It's like being reborn. I remember how excited I was to have a good government job and how proud my parents was. But to do this, to be able to share my story, to be able to, even like, the pandemic happened, it was like, I'm in the perfect time. I did it at the perfect time. There's a mental health crisis, and I'm here to help. I can promote learning for children, and it just felt so right. Even though, my pension was less than half of what I was making, uh, it just felt right. I, I made mistakes, but then I was able to take some actionable steps, and now there's no money loss. It's like, when you speak to pain
Mhm.
and you also speak to purpose, that's where transformation happens. And to see the transformation in the kids was a greater high for me than seeing it in adults.
Mm. That's amazing. And speaking of great timing, I guess right around the pandemic time is the perfect timing, because that's right about the time that we met. And who would have thought, it's like you journey into this new adventure, and then right around the corner the entire world just shuts down, and you've got to really hunker down and be like, okay. For some people, it was trying to figure out, like, what do I do? And then for someone like yourself, you already started to put those those plans into play.
It was definitely perfect timing, because when the pandemic hit, it felt like that's why I left. It felt like this is how it was supposed to happen. Like the steps that becoming a speaker and going through a stream execution program, it was like I was being prepared for that moment. And when the moment came, I was ready. I was already strapped up and ready to go. And when people were kind of struggling with what to do, I was already in motion.
Yeah.
I had things in motion. So it just, it's truly a blessing that everything happened the way it did. Not the pandemic,
Right.
but just to be ready for that emergency. I think, you know, God put me in that place for a reason.
Yeah. You mentioned some of the mistakes made before. Could you elaborate a little bit on it and what you were able to do to like course correct?
One of the mistakes I made was a lot in mindset. I was doing a lot of uh, over talking and underperforming.
Mm.
Uh, I was talking a lot about what I wanted to do, but I wasn't executing on that level. And I had to put my talk into action. I was posting a lot. I was doing a lot of those things, but I wasn't actually following through. You know, I had speaking engagements, but I wasn't really developing myself like I should have.
Mm. You
But
hitting
that's,
kind of close to home right now.
but you know, I was kind of floating by, and I think it was mostly my mindset had to change a lot from, you know, again, being with the government where they tell you what to do
Mm.
and have a lot of structure, a lot of rules where when you're on your own, I had to manage my time better. I had to, you know, I worked 8 hours for the government every day for 27 years.
Mm.
But when it sitting down for myself and for what my mission and my vision, you know, I'd spend 3 hours and I'd be good. You know, engagement. And at first I looked at it like, you know, this is what I made in a month. So this month I'm good. I
Mhm.
don't really work as hard. Um, but when I got my vision in place, again, I forgot about sitting in the warden's office and him mentioning money and
Mm.
me kind of offended. But then when I actually got into the business of it, here I am thinking about the money, trying to say, okay, did I make enough? I made enough, so I'm comfortable. And it was getting past some of those old behaviors and mindsets that I learned from the prison system. Uh, that was hard. And a lot of stuff from the prison I didn't realize was ingrained in my head. Some of the biases and some of the prejudices that I had in the back of my mind that were unconscious. I had to confront myself and ask myself hard questions. I was really one was a big one was when I first
Mhm.
started into the education business. I became a substitute teacher, and they offered me a long-term sub position at an alternative school. And I was like, man, I must be killing it because they bypassed everybody. And I had to have a hard conversation with myself that they didn't base that on skill. They based it on you worked in a prison and we want to make this school like a prison for these students that are getting in trouble, which was absolutely opposite of what my vision was.
Right.
But I was blind at the time thinking, yeah, I'm the perfect person for this, that I couldn't see the how my vision wasn't actually what was happening. It was unconsciously me thinking that this was a compliment, and it really wasn't,
Mm.
because it wasn't what I was speaking on. I was
Mm.
speaking equitable discipline. I was speaking on, you know, no cops in school. And here I am getting this long-term sub-position alternative school because technically I was a cop, and
Mhm.
they thought, hey, he's going to bring that hard stuff here. Um, So that was hard for me and I got out of that because of that. But it took me a minute to realize what was really happening, because, and Mike Tyson said this,
Mhm.
every person that helps you isn't your friend, and every person that seems like your enemy isn't. And they seemed like my friend,
Yeah.
but they really weren't helping me in my vision.
And it's hilarious. I just found that clip today. I just happened to come across it, and just hearing it and then like re-seeing it, rehearing it, I was like, okay, message received. Not to say like I need to go and just become paranoid of everyone, but it's kind of just like a notion to understand, like, just just pay attention to the things that go on around you. Don't just be like, okay, these are my friends, these are my enemies, because it's like they can flip flop positions, and it'll surprise you with things you didn't expect because you weren't looking for that.
Yes, like it was hidden in a compliment. Like, we want you here, we want you, but it really wasn't a compliment to me. As what I was doing, it was more so their own unconscious bias of what they felt somebody that worked in a prison should be.
I guess could you take me back to like where you grew up, how you grew up, and like just where you're at now, how some of those things kind of got you to this point?
Absolutely. And I'll take it back to my father. He was born in 1921. Uh, Grew up through the Great Depression in an abusive household. He was put in what they called back then a mental institution for being in a relationship with a Black woman. He was a white man. This is the late 1930s. Uh, he got out because of World War II, and he went and served the country in World War II. My mom was born in 1941, so there's a 20-year difference in them, and my mom is Black, and she grew up in Selma, Alabama, where the heart of the civil rights struggle. Uh, there's a picture of Martin Luther King crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and through all the people, my relatives used to show me there's somebody in the back with a kid on their shoulders, and they say, "That's your brother Greg on the shoulders." You can't see a blurry picture, but they tell me that's my brother Greg. Uh, Not We have the same mother. My mother and father didn't meet until she had two kids and he had one. They met in New York City. It's a romantic story that she was on the bus stop and he was passing by and he picked her up. I don't know if all that's true. It was raining. I think I said for me. But I grew up in New York, biracial child. I went to a school that was newly integrated. Uh, so it was different for kids nowadays to understand how that was, especially being biracial. Uh, I couldn't even get into preschool because of my mom's relationship. They couldn't buy a house because my mom couldn't have a bank account. And people really don't understand that concept,
Right.
because thing happened is really ancient. Here I am, a
Yeah.
54-year-old man whose mother couldn't have a bank account, couldn't buy a house. Uh, my father could, but he couldn't do it with my mother attached to it. It was illegal when I was born. It was illegal for them to be married. So they weren't married when I was born because they couldn't get married. Shortly after I was born, it was legal for them. It was then legal for them to get married, but they never did get married. Uh, we never spoke of step children. My brother's my brother, my sisters are my sisters. We grew up middle class, broke. We had enough.
Yeah.
Wasn't extra, a whole lot extra. They stressed education because my dad had a sixth grade education, uh, and my mom didn't have much. And so they really stressed education on me and not really my older siblings. It was, you're going to go to college, from the time I started school. And that's why I wanted to become a teacher, because I thought from my parents telling pushing college, I thought, well, I must gonna be a teacher. Um,
Yeah.
but I grew up with all the racism uh, from one side of the population. I grew up with some prejudice from the other side. I grew up with a renaissance. I feel there was a time when light-skinned kids were really popular, and I grew up with that popularity. Uh, I don't know if you're old enough to remember that time, but it was a
No, no. I mean, this for you, as you're telling me your story, it's an education for me because I kind of came to the US as an immigrant back in 97, and I immigrated from Cameroon, West Central Africa. So it's like I've got a completely different perspective from what it is that you're sharing with me. So it's like a whole another history lesson where it's like you learn some things in school, but not everything. And it's like you have to have these types of conversations to really like get I don't know if you ever get like a full picture or just like a new perspective that you may not have considered before.
this is a side note. I did the ancestry.com.
Mhm.
My on my mother's side is from Cameroon.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like 46% brought here to South Carolina, the whole bit. But my younger years, my dad really shaped how I felt my feelings about race is because uh, when I was denied going into preschool, I was with my mom. My dad brought me back to that preschool, left me in the car, came back and got me. And I could see the shock on the faces of the people that were in there. And it was because they seen me already and they denied me already. Well, they must have told my father, sure, bring your kid. And
Yeah.
he's right outside. And he brought me in and he cursed them out. And my dad had a real deep voice, and it was scary when he yelled, and he was yelling at those people. I thought the cops were going to come. And when he brought me to the car, I'm crying. And he was like, don't cry. Um, this is the way the world is. And he used terms that would seem offensive today, but again, in context, he was born in 1921. He was put in a mental institution because he was in a relationship with a Black woman.
Mm.
And he said to me, he said, you're colored and the world is going to see you as colored. Doesn't mean I love you any less. But anytime I want to go back to being a regular white man, I can just leave and go anywhere and nobody would know my past and I can be a regular white man. He said, you'll never have that privilege. You will always be seen in this country as colored and they're going to treat you as colored, but you have to stand up for yourself. And that always hit me because I always realized I'm not special. Um, I face the same things. I, I I do get some privilege for being light skinned and a man. There is some privilege there,
Mhm.
but for the most part, my life has been one of a Black man. And there were not. I went to a predominantly Black school. It was all love and everything. Decided that I was going to go to college, and I took off to Florida. And it was then that I decided I was going to get into criminal justice because that's where the jobs were. I didn't want to be middle class broke. I wanted to have a little more, but I always thought there was a ceiling for Black men. I didn't want to disrupt anything too much where, I end up in jail or end up a target. Um, and when I got older, and especially transitioning from a government job to working for myself, I realized there was so much more out there. And I want young people to know that there's so much more. There isn't a ceiling uh, for you. Like it's you have so much in you that you can, I hate to sound cliche, but to be and have anything that you want to have. I didn't realize that until I was close to 50. And I don't want kids to think that there's limit on their potential.
Right. And thank you for bringing that up, because I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine, and he shared with me the flea story, where it's like the flea has a like a 40-inch vertical or something like that. And he was like, they put the flea in a jar and they close the lid on it, and it's like it'll still keep going, but it's like it'll hit its head so many times until it realizes that, okay, maybe I can't jump as high. And it's like, despite the circumstances and different things that people have been made to face, and just even things that people may not face present day, but just from like the retelling of the stories that have the lingering effects of how they affect people mentally, it has a huge impact. But kind of realizing that there isn't a ceiling or a cap to like what you can do within your realm of belief. It's that's a great thing to kind of take hold of and actually start doing work towards that, like you did for yourself, going to school for criminology, but then seeing a place that you could pivot and find somewhere else that you are being effective and where you could become more effective.
Yeah, I learned that setting kids up for success is real easy from a school or a program, but the work is outside of that. The work is, like I tell teachers, is confronting that teacher that's having difficulties, going to your administration and saying, our discipline data doesn't look right, connecting with parents uh, more than your kid's in trouble. Uh, and then kids learn that it's more, there are people invested in me. There are people that are here for me on a higher level than just a paycheck.
Right. I I guess what's the experience been like for you in this new venture, speaking with kids and working with kids, and them kind of being able to recognize that an adult actually cares about them and isn't there just to like push paperwork, make sure they get a test taken, they've got every other thing under the sun going on, except for just like, oh, you're a bad kid, you're not going to amount to anything, like those types of things. Like, what do kids see in your classes? Like, how do they respond to you?
Kids, what I found is kids want real world challenges. And I think the disconnect from school happens because you're learning about things that don't really match with what's happening in their real world. Uh, if you say the Renaissance to kids, they think about old white people and the Romans. And what I try and do and say, yeah, that's a Renaissance, but have you heard about the Harlem Renaissance?
Mm.
And their eyes open. And I said, Black writers and Black poets, because a lot of the students I work with are Black, but even the white ones are like, I didn't know, there was that. I thought, a Renaissance was just white people. And I said, no, there's a Harlem Renaissance and Langston Hughes. And then they go home and they tell their parents they're learning about the Harlem Renaissance. And the parents are like, yeah, I've heard of him. And now the parents are connected. And that's what education should be. And today, even more so than ever, education is just under a full-fledged assault from banning of books and all that type of stuff.
Mm.
And makes makes me feel like my work is even more important
Right.
because kids want those kids want to see themselves in the curriculum. Kids want to see themselves in the school. But when they don't and they have a disconnect, that's where a lot of the disciplinary problems come from.
Mm.
I'm tired of learning about George Washington and John Adams, and what they did was wonderful to
Mhm.
start our country. But there's a lot of other people like Nat Turner. There's a lot of other people like Marcus Garvey. There's a lot of other people beyond Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks that I could be learning about. There's people I could be learning about. Don't forget Black History in September.
Right.
So it's getting that sense of pride, that real world connection is keeping them, I think, for me, helps me keep them engaged, keep them interested, and keeps them motivated.
Yeah, that's a good point. That the motivation's a huge piece because I think it was ET that said it, Dr. Eric Thomas, that it might have been at a meetup, but I remember him saying that is just as important as taking a shower because some people would think like, oh, like, okay, I'm motivated today, so what? But it's like, okay, you get motivated, maybe you go through life, you go through your day, but it's like it's good to start the next day with kind of like a in your step. And ultimately, if you're able to motivate yourself, that's the goal, that you don't need someone else to always push you. But in the event you do, just to get started, there's elements and there's resources for that. But like you said, being able to make things relevant present day and also get kids interested or even adults interested to where they can have that thing in common they can both talk about is a great it's a great mediator to kind of like break the ice to be like, oh, okay, like you guys are learning something worthwhile, or you're not just bringing me like math that we're making up. Just, we're just like, okay, like math wasn't interesting enough, so we just had to spruce it up a little bit. And it's like, now I can't help you do your homework because you're doing like hieroglyphics over here or something.
Telling you. Yeah, but it's all in our stories. I think kids look at things and they think you've always been where you are right now. And if you don't tell them the process, they won't know. And they figure, well, this isn't for me because they've had it differently. And even with the motivation part of it, I always tell kids, I don't wake up on 10. I may wake up on 2, I may wake up on 8. The idea is to get to 10. And you're not always going to be motivated like those things. You just have to be disciplined. When I wake up on 2, I know I have to take maybe some extra time to motivate. I got to really focus on the smallest things, brushing my teeth, making my bed, to create some small wins to gain my momentum so I can get to 10 at a good time where I'm not stuck. If you wake up on 2 and you don't brush your teeth, you don't make your bed, and then you don't eat, you're stuck. You're going to be stuck on 2. So getting those small wins early and starting early gets you, like the story I love about Kobe is he talks about, yeah, you wake up at 7, you work out from 9 to 11, you have lunch, you after lunch you work out from 1 to 3, and then you have dinner and you may work out from 5 to 7, and then you go to bed again. He said, well, I get up at 4. I've already worked out once before you're even up in the morning. By the time you've had breakfast, I've had 2 workouts. When you've had lunch and done 1 workout, I've already done 3. And that's just building that momentum. So when it's game time, he's on 10. And for young people to understand, the process of school is that before game time, because when you come to adult, that's game time. So it's learning the process of getting up and getting those small wins and doing that over and over again. So you become an expert at that. So when it's game time for whatever you want to do, whether it's be an entrepreneur or, you know, work for the state or cure cancer or whatever it is, excuse me, you've already built up, you already know how to get that momentum and be the best version of yourself.
Yeah. I like that you pointed out that as adults you have to be willing to share the process with a kid, because a lot of times we can look at kids or newborns and just be like, okay, like this is the ideal, this is a blank slate, we can mold them and make them into what not. But it's, I think a lot of times, forgetting how we got to where we are, we try and like, we're not going to talk about that, and we're just going to build you up to be like, you're this, you're that. Like, yes, you want to affirm a child, you want to do all those things, but it's like you can very quickly set somewhat up for failure if like you don't have to tell them every single thing under the sun, because it's like there's nothing new under the sun, but you're going to um, face different things in life. But at least knowing that an adult or someone that you look up to has gone through something, like when you come up against it, it doesn't feel that unconquerable. It doesn't feel like that much impossible. And like you said, being able to get out of that funk, but like work your way up with those study steps, like brushing your teeth, washing your face, making your bed, like just those small steps to like get your morning going. And you're like, okay, like I've got these small things I can check off the list. And it's like, okay, what's the next small thing I can do? And then it doesn't seem so daunting of a task to say, okay, I'm going to get out of the house. I'm going to drive however long the commute is. I'm going to spend, uh, what is it, 3 to 8 to 12, 14 hours on this job, depending on if you're teaching or you're working in hard labor or something like that. But it's all all those people that kind of make the world go round and round. They have to make those small steps every single day. And it's it speaks to just like how resilient people are, but also like what it takes to just be part of this human experience that we all know and share.
Yeah, that's the human experience. And, my proudest thing is watching my daughter create her own business. And she's battled lupus, but she became a fitness body professional. Uh, and is seeing those lessons play out where she's doing it better than I did. I wish I had her heart right now. I wish I had her drive right now. My son, uh, who makes mistakes along the way, but I can see him gathering himself and learning from them and making his own way through the world. And it's like, wow, you know, they're a part of me, but they're the best of me, even through anything I've been through. They've got the best parts of being a human, and watching them succeed and excel, ups and downs, is makes me proud.
That's amazing. What's the year been like for you so far? Just as you, I guess we're on the tail end of 2022 at this point.
It has been. I got married this year, so I think it's affirming the person I've always wanted to be. This is the year that I feel like I've peeled the onion and I'm the person I've always wanted to be. Even if I am 54, uh, I finally became the person I wanted to be. I'm finally doing the things that I've always wanted to do. I'm finally following my dreams and not somebody else's dreams. I'm finally speaking up for myself. I'm finally in a good place spiritually and mentally and with my family. It hasn't always been that way. Uh, Unfortunately, a lot of my life I spent selfishly. I'll be the first to admit it. Uh, I've only thought about me, and to finally get to a point where you found peace, uh, 2022 has brought that to me.
That's amazing. Very proud of you.
Thank you.
And what, I guess it might be an easy answer, but as you go into the new year, what does 2023 look like, or what do you want to see a year from now looking back?
I want to see continued progress because I know there's going to be challenges ahead. I know I used to always tell men that were incarcerated, everything that you've done in your past hasn't gone away. When you go back out, you're going to be confronted with it. So as you reach success, there's always things that will come up. I know there'll be old habits and old things that I'm going to have to confront. So I think 2023, next year, I want to be able to say I've met those challenges that are coming. I was prepared for those challenges, and I've just continued my success with less of my own trip ups. There are going to be things, life happens, but there's some things I can prevent. I tell teachers and administrators all the time, you don't have to be in these data meetings, because if you can predict it, you can prevent it. And there's some things I can predict in my life that I can prevent. I know myself well enough to know when I'm slipping, so I can predict it. I
Yeah,
can prevent, and that's going to be 2023. This coming year for me is sticking to my word, being able to predict it and also preventing it.
I like that. Um, let people know how they can get in touch with you and learn more about the program that you're working with.
Sure, thank you. All my social media is at Wevolutionary. Uh, if you want to get a hold of me on social media, if speaking or for speaking engagements, you can email info@wevolutionarymotivation.com. My website is in the school to prison pipeline.com, and the two is the number two, not the word two. So it's in the school to prison pipeline.com.
I love it. And from the first question I asked you, are you still who you said you were?
I am, I hope not, because I hope to just continue to evolve, uh, in one way or another, just continue to evolve. The world is changing every day. So, uh, one of my favorite quotes from Bob Marley is, bad people don't take a day off, so I won't. So as long as I'm not taking a day off, I'm continuing to evolve and meet the challenges of the world.
I love that. Thank you so much, Mr. Webb, for the time.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome.